We're now joined by education expert Professor Mary Metcalfe joining us via Zoom. Thank you so very much for joining us, Prof. Always a pleasure to have you here on SA Today.
Thank you, Faith.
As a start, the DBE seems quite confident about the readiness of schools tomorrow and their ability to receive more learners. What are your thoughts when it comes to the fact that we will have a sort of, I want to use the word, influx of students coming into schools tomorrow?
Well, it's going to be a very complex set of issues for every school to be ready for tomorrow. And I hope that the break that the school management teams have had has enabled them to both rest and to prepare. And what's going to be complicated is for the grades that are returning, their absence from school has been since March. They've missed months and months of school. It's almost like the start of the school year. They may not remember what they were taught in the first term of the year. And they're coming back to schools which are substantially different to the schools that they left. And the key differences are that in addition to the processes and routines and rituals and discipline of school normally, there are now new challenges and demands daily of hand washing, of sanitizing, of wearing masks, of physically distancing. And it's not an easy thing for a school leader to be able to hold as many as 1,000 learners to these new processes. The other thing that's going to be very different for learners is because of the internationally accepted need to physically distance learners. The DBE has provided guidelines that say that the classes should be 50% of the size that they were before. And the only way that can be managed is for learners to alternate daily or weekly or another kind of system. So learners will come back, they'll have to be reorientated to the particular disciplines of being at school. They'll have to remember where they were before they left. They'll have to learn these new routines, and they'll have to adjust to learning as much at home on their own without being in a class as the amount of time that they have at school. It's going to be a big adjustment for schools, for learners, for families.
Prof, a lot of learning, as you mentioned, has unfortunately now been missed already. And though it might not be really a big crisis to those that aren't in matric this year, where do the teachers and learners sort of start to pick up? I spoke to the Department of Basic Education and I used the words catching up, and I was told we're no longer catching up, but actually just kind of trying to get in as much work as we can this year. And I wonder if what your analysis on that is that a good move? I've been told that the words catching up are not really being used by the Department of Basic Education. And in terms of getting the learners then ready for the next year, for 2021, I mean, this is a heavy load, not just for the learners, but indeed the teachers themselves who have to play, and I don't know what word to use at this point, but I will say catching up then.
I am delighted that the DBE is no longer using the word catching up. I think that it's absolutely essential for us to understand that what's been taught is what can be assessed. We can't be working towards an assessment where learners haven't yet learned the material. So we've got to reorientate the way that we plan for the end of the year for all but the grade 12s, so that teachers are responsive to where learners are, what they've understood, what the gaps are. They're going to have to go all the way back to the material that was taught in term 1, work out what learners have been able to remember, what they've forgotten, where they need practice. And the DBE has provided guidelines for teachers to adjust within the guidelines to learner needs. Now, learner needs has now got to be central in the way that we understand how we support learners. Learners need to feel supported. They need to, we all need to understand that there's psychosocial pressures on them. And I think that it would be a very bad move to let learners feel that they're now under pressure to pass or fail at the end of this year. No, what wasn't taught this year needs to be extended into next year and the year after. So teachers are going to be using their professional judgment, their debate with colleagues, to look at where learners are and where they need to catch up over the next few years. We must reduce the stress of passing and failing and the inequities of some learners being able to have had more opportunity to learn than others. Let's get schools back as centers of care and concern. Let's support schools and let's support our teachers who have a very difficult job ahead of them in multiple ways. Multiple ways, not only because they have to cope with a whole new set of demands, but also they're going to have to prepare teaching for what they teach with learners at school and support them in terms of work to take home.
And, as we close our conversation, another question actually that I posed to the Department of Education was about the lessons that were learned during this pandemic. The fact is that a lot of, gaps and shortcomings and loopholes were very much exposed because of this pandemic. And I asked the question to the Department of Basic Education what lessons they believe they've learned moving forward. We will pass hopefully soon this pandemic and will not have to deal with COVID-19 hopefully quite soon. But the fact of the matter is our schools, our public schools are really in quite a state, and we've seen that repeatedly even here on the show. My question was answered by the Department of Basic Education saying to me, well, we've now realized that partnerships do work, with the various departments, and that, departments shouldn't really work alone, but that there needs to be some sort of synergies. And I wonder if that is, according to you as an education expert, an adequate sort of answer. Because, the fact of the matter is we look at these schools and some of them are really in deplorable state.
Yeah. There's so much learning, and I hope that despite the difficulties of COVID, we take this learning seriously. First of all, I think many South Africans have been shocked at the infrastructural challenges that schools face in responding to COVID, the basic absence of sanitation and water. We've also learned that there's huge inequalities in the way in which learners can access material online, that even much of the material that's been put on the DBE website has not been accessible to learners from homes where people don't have multiple devices, where there's no access to reliable internet, and people can't afford the data. The other thing that I hope that we've learned is that problems at school level can't be solved by edict. We have to bring all stakeholders together to work and find solutions and to access the wisdom of everyone. I think this has been one of the greatest weaknesses of our response as a country to COVID, is that we've waited for instructions from the top. We haven't built partnerships of stakeholders who understand the situation in the very complex and different environments of different schools. And we can't, I hope we've learned that there isn't a one-size-fits-all from above, but that we have to craft solutions to the circumstances facing each school. And what that means is that rather than officials coming to say, you were told to do this, and why haven't you complied, that we have officials going to school to say, how can we help you respond to the challenges that you're facing in the context of the national guidelines? How can we, as education departments, work more effectively with associations representing teachers, representing school governing bodies? So the return to a collaborative problem-solving, we are in this together approach would be a great win for me from COVID, as well as addressing infrastructural challenges and addressing some of the inequalities that have been so glaringly obvious.
All right, Professor Mary Metcalfe, always a pleasure having you here with us on SABC News, and we certainly do appreciate your time as always.
Thank you.
All right, that's Professor Mary Metcalfe, an education expert, weighing in really on the Department of Basic Education's assessment in terms of readiness and their ability to receive more learners from tomorrow at schools, and certainly will keep you updated throughout here on SABC News. Well, as many learners do prepare to go back to schools, fear and anxiety has engulfed the nation. The World Health Organization has advised